Nobody is going to tell you this on the evening news. The highlights will not run on the biggest sports shows. The debates will not happen on the morning programs. But in one single week in June 2026, Caitlin Clark rewrote the WNBA record books, not once, not twice, but 3 CP3 records that took 28 years to build, all broken in 7 days. Most of the world does not even know it happened. So today, we are walking through every single one together. These numbers are real, these records are permanent. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why this week belongs in history, the record that changed after. She arrived to understand why the first record matters. You have to understand what it actually demands of a human being. To produce it, a 30-point 10-assist game is not just a good night. It is not simply a player getting hot and everything falling. It is one of the rarest individual statistical combinations in the history of professional basketball, a performance that requires a player to carry 2 completely opposite offensive responsibilities at the exact same time. Across 40 or more minutes of elite competition against professionals whose entire
does Clark up and in!
Job is to stop exactly that from happening. Scoring 30 points in a professional basketball game means you are the engine. You are the one creating your own shot, finding space against defenders who have studied your tendencies on film, and converting at a rate that puts 30 points on the board before the final buzzer. Rate that is a mountain on its own. Now add 10 assists to that same night, point 10 times in that same game. You have to shift your entire mindset from scorer to creator, reading the defense in real time, identifying the open teammate in a fraction of a second, making the decision before the window closes, and delivering a pass precise enough that your teammate can catch and convert it cleanly, point 10 times. In the same game where you also scored 30. That is not 2 things happening at once. That is 2 completely different elite skills being executed simultaneously across the same 40-plus minutes against a defense that is doing everything in its power to make both of them impossible. Most elite basketball players spend their entire careers on one side of that equation. The scorers score that playmakers create. The rare few who can genuinely do both at a high level are celebrated as generational talents. And even those players, the ones who are specifically
I'm looking. Here's Clark. She fires, and it goes!
Job is to stop exactly that from happening. Scoring 30 points in a professional basketball game means you are the engine. You are the one creating your own shot, finding space against defenders who have studied your tendencies on film, and converting at a rate that puts 30 points on the board before the final buzzer. Rate that is a mountain on its own. Now add 10 assists to that same night, point 10 times in that same game. You have to shift your entire mindset from scorer to creator, reading the defense in real time, identifying the open teammate in a fraction of a second, making the decision before the window closes, and delivering a pass precise enough that your teammate can catch and convert it cleanly, point 10 times. In the same game where you also scored 30. That is not 2 things happening at once. That is 2 completely different elite skills being executed simultaneously across the same 40-plus minutes against a defense that is doing everything in its power to make both of them impossible. Most elite basketball players spend their entire careers on one side of that equation. The scorers score that playmakers create. The rare few who can genuinely do both at a high level are celebrated as generational talents. And even those players, the ones who are specifically
Commissioner's Cup game again. Indiana still very much alive as Boston and Cardoso tip it up, and we are underway.
She produced it 3 times herself. On June 12, 2026, Indiana Fever faced the Chicago Sky, and on paper, it was a regular season mid-June game. What unfolded was something that the record books had to scramble to accommodate. Clark scored 32 points. She dished out 10 assists. She went to the free throw line 15 times and made every single 1.15 for 15, perfect, in a game that went to overtime and demanded more from her legs and her mind than a regulation 40 minutes ever could. Indiana won 114-106 when the overtime buzzer sounded, and when the final statisticians updated their records, the number next to Clark's name in that 30 and 10 column moved from 2 to 3. 3. The rest of the league, combined, has 4. Clark alone has 3. Is there a more efficient way? To illustrate the distance between where she plays and where the rest of the record books live, she is not approaching history from a distance. She is rewriting it from the inside, one performance at a time, at a pace that the sport was simply not built to accommodate. The Indiana Fever entered that game at 6 wins and 5 losses, a team with something.
Clark can't hit. Got her own one-hand pass to Boston.
To prove, a roster quietly building towards something meaningful all season long, when Clark produces a 32-point, 10-assist, 15 for 15 performance in overtime, she does not just win the game for Indiana, she sends a message to every other team in the league about what is coming for the rest of the season. Every opponent who watches that film, and every opponent watches that film, now has to ask themselves the same uncomfortable question. If preparation, professionalism, and a well-designed defensive scheme were not enough to stop her on June 12, a Central Division matchup times, what exactly is the answer? There is not one. That is what 3:30 and 10 games tells you, the first time Clark produced. That combination, opposing coaches logged it as an outlier, a peak night where everything fell her way, and the conditions were perfect. The second time, that explanation became harder to sustain. The third time, against a team that had every reason and every resource to be ready for exactly what she was going to do, the explanation evaporates entirely. 3 times at that threshold is not a hot streak. It is not a phase. It is a capability. It is a tool Clark carries into.
Time scoring leader in women's all-time scoring leader in college basketball. D1 college basketball.
It stops being a record.
Every game she plays. And the rest of the league now has to build their entire defensive preparation around the knowledge that she might use it on any given night, against any opponent, in any building. The free throw line performance from that game deserves its own moment of reflection, because it reveals something about Clark. That raw scoring. 15 attempts, 15 makes, in overtime, with her team needing every single point, with a defense trying everything available to slow her down. The free throw line. There is no defense, no shot clock, no physical contest. Just a player, a ball, and a basket, and the full weight of the game sitting on every single attempt. And in that stripped-back moment, where composure is the only tool available, Clark was perfect. Not nearly perfect, not impressive. Perfect. That kind of performance under that kind of pressure does not come from natural ability alone. It is built across thousands of hours of practice and hundreds of high-pressure moments. That a mental foundation that, at only 24 years old, Clark has already constructed at a level that the record books are still catching up to. The record only she can break. When a record is broken once, it is a landmark, a line in the history books that marks a specific moment and a specific player. When a record is broken again, it becomes a statement, evidence that the first time was not an accident, not a peak that is already passed, but a floor that is still rising. And when an athlete extends her own record to 8 career performances that represent most of any player in the entire history of the sport, it stops being a record entirely and starts being something different. It becomes a pattern, a signature, a statistical fingerprint so uniquely and completely hers that it requires its own category in the record books. 0.8 times. That is how many games Caitlin Clark has recorded 25 points and 10 assists. 8 career performances at that combined threshold, more than any player in the history of the WNBA. And the name sitting closest to her on that all-time list is not a placeholder or a forgotten name from an earlier era. Sabrina Ionescu of the New York Liberty, a 2-time All-Star, one of the most gifted offensive players this league has ever produced, a player whose combination of 3-point shooting, court vision, and basketball intelligence had set a new standard for what a guard in the WNBA could be, has 5. Clark has 8.3 more than the next greatest combined score playmaker in the history of the sport, and the gap is not closing every time Clark takes the floor and reaches that 25-10 threshold. The distance between her and everyone behind her grows by exactly 1 more. What does it feel like to extend your own record? Think about what that means in practical terms. When Clark steps onto the floor and produces a 25-10 performance, which she has now done 8 times across 3 professional seasons, she is not chasing someone else's achievement. She is not trying to catch a number that belongs to another player. She crossed that line a long time ago. She is simply adding to a total that only she can reach. Numbers can sometimes obscure